Hey everybody, I'm Cam Forrester, and this is my mini documentary about the Vox Continental combo organ. So in this documentary, we're going to briefly look at the history and development of the Continental. We're also going to talk about this specific organ in particular and the journey that it's been on since I've owned it. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to play a medley of hits that originally featured a Vox Continental in them. So first of all, let me give you an overview of the development and history of the Continental organ. Before the Vox brand came into existence in 1957, Tom Jennings, the founder of Jennings Musical Industries, or JMI, manufactured a line of home, theatre and church electronic organs, calling his enterprise the Jennings Organ Company. By 1961, Tom Jennings identified a new market for his organ technology. He noticed that many music groups in England had adopted the use of Hammond spinet-type organs, such as the M100 and L100. For those of you who aren't too familiar with the history of Hammond organs, the Hammond spinet range of electric tone wheel organs were slightly smaller alternatives to the more desirable Hammond console range. The first Hammond console, the Model A, was invented back in 1934 by former engineer and clockmaker Lawrence Hammond as a cheaper alternative to pipe organs for churches and auditoriums. The organ's electromechanical tone generator consisted of a synchronous motor geared to a chassis network of 96 individual tone wheels, each generating sine wave-like tones via magnetic pickups, which could be controlled via harmonic drawbars in a similar fashion to the way that stops work on a traditional pipe organ, and played via the keyboards, known as manuals in organ terminology, and pedal keyboard, or pedal clavier. The output of the organ was then amplified and played through a speaker cabinet. It became the first ever successful electronic organ, selling widely throughout the United States as well as internationally during the 1940s and 50s, having been popularized by recording artists such as Latin pop organist Ethel Smith and later by jazz organist Jimmy Smith. Hammond organs were imported to the UK for a few years, but the outbreak of World War II in 1939 stopped all unnecessary imports, and no new models reached the UK until restrictions were finally lifted in 1955, a whole decade after the war had ended. By then, demand was little for the expensive full-size console models, which were not imported in large numbers again until the mid-1960s. Prior to then, keyboard players in the emerging R&B, soul and rock music scenes were influenced by the contemporary jazz organ sound of Jimmy Smith, who famously used Hammond's latest B3 model, which had new vibrato, chorus and percussion features, initially gravitated to the more affordable spinet range, which also had these new features but was slightly smaller in size. Despite the reduced weight of these models, however, they were still very heavy and cumbersome for gigging musicians. On that basis, JMI organ gurus Derek Underdown and Les Hill set out to make a lightweight transistorized drawbar style portable organ that could be marketed as an alternative to Hammond organs by developing a way to electronically simulate the pitched flute organ tones produced by the mechanical tone wheel system. Their ingenious solution was to create 12 small solid-state tone generator printed circuit cards, one for each note of the musical scale. Each of these had a master oscillator, which used a pair of germanium transistors, several capacitors and a tuning coil, and the output was fed serially through 6 slave divider circuits, which dropped the input frequency in half or by 1 octave, providing 7 individual octaves of tones that could be combined and adjusted by the drawbar circuit of the organ. They also featured a distinctive trapezoidal wave electronic vibrato effect, as a more basic alternative to the electromechanical scanner vibrato used in Hammond organs. The instruments were produced at the JMI factory in Dartford, Kent, and introduced to the market as the Vox Continental, model TC or V301J, in 1962. The earliest version of the Continental, which had a more boxy orange lid, was played by Mike Smith of the Dave Clark 5, and Vox prominently displayed their logo on all sides of their celebrity endorsee's instrument. By 1964, the orange lids of the Continental had a more tapered appearance, and the bold brand advertising was reduced to a small, gold-plated Vox logo facing the musician, and a larger Vox Continental logo plate glued to the front of the organ facing the audience. This model was very popular and was famously played by John Lennon of the Beatles and Alan Price of the Animals. A double manual version called the Continental 2 was subsequently released in 1966 with an optional foot pedal clavier, and later a version with percussion features. Back in 1963, Tom Jennings had sold a controlling interest in JMI to the Royston Group, a British holding company, for £100,000 in order to raise capital for expansion, but still remained employed as head of the company. After the Beatles led the British invasion to America in 1964 and sales of the infamous AC-30 as well as other amp models boomed, the Thomas Organ Company of Sepulveda, Los Angeles was then appointed to produce their products in the USA in exchange for $1 million to bypass importation costs and ensure demand could be met. Thomas Organ electronically redesigned the single manual Continental circuits in order to improve reliability but preserve the same sound by replacing all the germanium transistors in the tone generators, preamp and vibrato circuits with the newer and more reliable silicon transistors. Cosmetically, the organs were almost identical, although the colour scheme of the drawbar knobs was changed from yellow and red to white and red. The US Continental, model V301H, was produced from late 1965 until the end of 1966. Notable American players included Ray Manzarek of The Doors and Ron Pigpen McKernan of The Grateful Dead. Welsh musician John Cale also played one as a member of the Velvet Underground, who were endorsed by Vox USA in 1966. After only 1 year of US production, at the end of 1966, Thomas Organ president Joe Benaron proposed to consolidate all Vox amp and organ production to one plant in Italy, being unhappy with the high costs of labour in both the US and UK, since Vox guitars were already being produced there at the EKO and Crucianelli plants under licence from JMI, who were struggling to meet their demand in the UK. The Italian musical instrument manufacturer Elettronica Musicale Europea, or EME, was contracted to produce the Continental, Super Continental, the renamed Italian version of the original UK Continental 2, and Continental 300, a Super Continental with additional features such as reverb and presets. Despite the JMI factory in Erith, Kent suffering a major fire in December of 1965 and a large amount of stock being destroyed by water, Benaron's proposal to produce all Vox products in Italy was rejected by JMI, and the UK plants were retained. After noticing that the Continental models were above the price range affordable to many musicians, however, JMI did introduce a more basic and budget-friendly model called the Jaguar, which was produced by another Italian manufacturer, Galanti Edigio Mondeno, or GEM, under license. Thomas Organ had also made a radical shift towards supposedly more reliable solid-state circuitry in their amplifier range, spelling the beginning of the end to vast orders for equipment from JMI in late 1966. Ironically, the new solid-state models were often returned with faults, and it gradually emerged that the market decidedly preferred valve amps. Jennings was displeased with this new direction, and meanwhile his relationship with the Royston Group was becoming strained. By 1967, Royston were in financial trouble due to the commercial failure of their Midas black box aircraft flight recorders. John Oram, who worked for JMI at the time, recalled, "Tom used to treat himself fairly regularly to a new Jaguar. He'd gone through the whole range. He'd had the Mark II, the Mark X, and then decided that he wanted a silver E-Type. He was at a board meeting and happened to let it slip that he'd ordered one. The board went crazy. 'You don't need a new car,' they said. They sacked him. He came over to the research department over the road, where myself, Chief Engineer Dick Denny, and a few others were. He had tears running down his face and said in words to the effect of, 'Those bastards have kicked me out of my own company. I'm going to start again. Dick, will you come with me?' Dick said, 'Yes, Gov.' He said, 'John, will you come with me?' And I said, 'Well, yes.' 'You can become my chief engineer,' he said." The Dartford papers reported that Jennings was dismissed due to a difference of opinion on domestic policy. Jennings' solicitor soon commenced proceedings in the High Court for wrongful dismissal and later obtained judgment against the company. Using the money from the court judgment, Jennings did indeed start a new venture called Jennings Electronic Developments, which was later renamed Jennings Electronic Industries, with the group of loyal colleagues that followed him. The company went on to produce rebadged versions of the original JMI AC30, as well as several new amplifier models, PA equipment, electric organs, effects pedals, and more, up until when Tom Jennings passed away at the age of 60 in 1978. After Royston went into receivership, the Vox brand went through a long and complicated period of financial struggles and organisational changes throughout the late 60s and early 70s, and during this time, Marshall overtook Vox as the leading company in the British guitar amplifier market. Continental organs continued to be produced in Italy between 1967 and 1971, and the last generation of the original single manual design was the model V301E. The Italian Continentals bizarrely reverted to the germanium transistor circuitry and had plastic keys rather than the wooden keys used on the previous British and American models. The lighter keys improved the playing action, but they were unfortunately less durable. Cosmetic changes included the chrome stand braces being mounted crossed over instead of together in the centre, and the colour scheme of the drawbar knobs changed for a final time to white and black. By 1973, the Vox brand had completely disappeared from the market until it was bought by Rose Morris in 1978, who released a redesigned AC30 as well as several other new models, and who were later acquired by Korg in 1992, who still own the Vox brand today. As for the Continental's legacy, throughout the 1960s, other companies such as Farfisa, Gibson, Acetone, Yamaha, Rheem, and many others all made their own attempts to copy and or improve on the sound and features of the Vox, the first truly portable electric organ, or combo organ as they have since become referred to varying success, including Vox themselves, with the double manual Continental II of 1966, and both the Continental Baroque and Riviera of 1968. The transistorized sound of these instruments was integral to a great many popular recordings made across the decade, and became one of the defining characteristics in music of the era. Ultimately, however, the superior sound of the Hammond organ prevailed, so towards the end of the 1960s and throughout the 1970s, many keyboard players in bands who were successful enough to afford substantial road crews graduated to playing Hammond consoles and other keyboard instruments such as electric pianos and later analog synthesizers. The combo organ sound has reappeared at times over the decades since, generally in music influenced by this era such as new wave and indie rock, but the technological development of digital keyboards and sampling technology in the 80s and 90s meant that players' rigs were generally becoming much more compact, and the need for carrying around sensitive, cumbersome instruments was for the most part a thing of the past. Modern sample-based keyboards such as the Nord Electro and the Korg Vox Continental have included vintage Continental and Hammond samples in them, which has helped introduce the retro keyboard sounds to new generations of players. Personally though, being someone who relishes inconvenience, for me nothing compares to the physical playing experience of the originals, even if it does mean having to tinker around with them from time to time to keep them working right. So this particular organ was built in 1964 and has the earlier Vox Continental logo on the back there, and also on the Schaller made but Vox branded expression pedal has the same logo etched into the metal. Now this organ, when I first got it, had quite a few problems, to be honest. It was missing a number of parts and had lots of missing tones, and the vibrato switch didn't work. And also the condition of the chrome Z stand was really bad, so I had that re-chromed. I've fixed the vibrato switch. I've gone inside and cleaned all of the contacts so that all of the tones are coming through, and also had to replace a number of resistors, and most recently one of the transistors, which was causing some of the tones either to be playing at the wrong octave or be dead altogether. So it's now working 100%. I've also replaced a number of hardware parts that were missing, such as the latches on the side and also the wing screws that hold the Z stand into the organ. So yeah, it's now fully complete, fully working, and unfortunately it's now been sold because I really just haven't used it as much as I thought I was going to use it, to be honest. Obviously I used it for the Sister Ray video, which I'm really proud of, and of course this video, but other than that I just don't really see myself using it as much as I originally imagined. So I'm really hoping the new owner will, and obviously they'll be able to enjoy it in fully working condition from the outset, where of course unfortunately I wasn't able to. But I'm really glad that I've got it working again in the time that I've had it, and yeah, I wish all the best to the new owner. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video about the Continental, and I hope you enjoy my performances in the medley section, which is about to follow now.